guys, this is the CinemaScope here. I'm Joe Brown, and we are back with season 2 of the CinemaScope podcast. I want to thank everyone that has listened to season 1, and for any new listeners, all episodes are available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I'm delighted to introduce Eugene Kotlyarenko as my first guest on season 2. Eugene is a supremely talented director who's going to achieve great things in film. How are you doing, Eugene?
Good, man. Wow, you're really putting the pressure on. I'm going to do great things. I hope so. But it's nice. You have that nice accent, and it feels like you're looking at a crystal ball. And I feel like, wow, what the fuck does he know? He knows this guy knows something. Joe knows something.
Thanks, man. Well, I believe you're going to do great things after seeing your movie Spree, which we're going to get into because it is fantastic. But basically, I reached out to Eugene after seeing Spree, which has recently dropped on the UK Netflix. It stars Stranger Things actor Joe Keery, and playing his father in the film is David Arquette. I was in total awe of this film, and I really wanted to talk to the mastermind behind it all. So I'm so happy Eugene agreed to chat. And basically, I just want to start off with where you're from and how come you wanted to decide to get into film.
Okay, where I'm from, I was born in a country that doesn't exist anymore called the USSR. And I escaped from there, not me personally, but my parents, and they dragged me along, luckily. And we moved to the States, and I grew up in Brooklyn, in South Brooklyn, where there's a large Russian community. I'm actually writing a movie right now kind of about my childhood, like assimilating in the States, and Brighton Beach, which is the area in Brooklyn that I grew up. And then lived in other places around New York throughout my teen years, and went to college in New York. And when I was 21, I moved to Hollywood, California. What made me want to make movies? I was as a child, very obsessed with assimilating to American culture. And long story short, I started listening to classical music and all these sort of very pretentious things that I thought would allow me to become a true blue, red-blooded American, which, going to museums and things that actually don't make any sense. And then I watched a movie randomly when I was 11 years old. I don't know, I guess you would consider it a British-American co-production called A Clockwork Orange. And that movie changed my life. It made me, first of all, it felt very naughty to watch it. Yeah. And second of all, it made me realize, like, wow, movies synthesize all of these things I'm interested in, like, photography and art and music and stories and performance and all these things that, are disparate and powerful in disparate ways, and their own special formal ways, become, like a megatron of psychological and emotional and aesthetic power when they are combined into one medium, which is movies, which, cannot be denied the synthetic power of movies. And so, you start watching them and you get obsessed with watching, you start taking notes, you start writing in journals, and all of a sudden one day you say, well, maybe I should make one, I have an idea for something that I haven't seen. I think that's how it starts. Or you start saying, I have an idea for something I haven't seen, or I have a story that would be fun for me to watch. And now you just have to go through the excruciating and difficult task of figuring out how to do that, since movies require, even on the most basic level, some resources, right? You have to have something to edit footage on. You have to have something to shoot footage with. You have to have a subject, whether that's documentary or, forcing a friend to get in front of the camera, or forcing yourself to get in front of the camera. All things that I have done and continue to do. So yeah, that's kind of the origin story. I don't know, superhero, supervillain, or just regular schlub, probably more like that. But that's the origin story.
Yeah, very cool. So did you go to film school, or did you go to college?
I went to college. I went to Columbia University. Yeah, I studied a lot of things, including film theory. They don't have an undergraduate filmmaking
Right.
coursework. But often what I would do is if I had a professor who I liked, whether it was in philosophy or Russian literature or English literature,
Hmm.
I would ask if I could do the final paper as a film. So
Yeah.
usually every semester I ended making one film on my own with no real kind of like technical or financial support from the school, but
Hmm.
I was on campus, I was with my classmates, my friends, whatever, and we would
Hmm.
make a film. And I would ditch kind of all my classes the last week and just make the film and then edit it and blah blah blah.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't know. It didn't really. I guess it taught me how to do stuff without institutional support, which is
Mm.
kind of my whole career thus
Mm.
far up until Spree was very independent and was
Mm.
very I'm like there's really no looking back upon like my quote unquote career or whatever, there's really no reason for me to have been in Hollywood
Hmm.
since all of my movies before Spree were like really independent and like
Yeah.
made with like money that came from totally random people that had nothing to do with the film industry.
Yeah.
um and I would say the one benefit from living in Los Angeles and making these films is that, there were really talented artists and craftswomen, and craftspeople that were getting paid very well to work on commercials and music videos and mainstream television and movies, who would be very happy to take a week out of their lives or 9 days out of their lives to shoot a movie with me for almost no money. And so
Uh-huh.
then I was able to, lucky enough to work with a lot of talented, artists
Hmm.
on the technical side for nothing, for very little money.
Yeah.
Other than that, I haven't really been integrated into the industry until very recently.
Right, cool. Would you say that going through all of that, say working on the very more independent side of film and basically doing all of your own back, really, is going to stand you in good stead going forward? Do you think it's definitely helped you to create the
Um,
films that you're going to create?
yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm extremely neurotic, and I think when you have very little financial resources as a
Hmm.
filmmaker, everything you're writing and everything you're planning, you're constantly thinking about your limited resources. And
Hmm.
I actually always think like limitations and obstacles are great ways to get creative,
Hmm.
And so I have a very like producerial mind when I am writing and directing and stuff, even with Spree, even with stuff I'm writing now.
Hmm.
You have to make these calculated decisions of like what you're going to have access to, just resources wise, whether that's actors or locations
Hmm.
or how many shoot days you're going to have or whatever. So I do think it's good to have like a producer mind when you're coming up with your grand ideas or your,
Hmm.
aesthetic sort of approach. I mean, Spree was 15 times more expensive to make than my previous films, which it was still a very small budget. Like you can tell,
Yeah.
like I'm talking to some, you tell these execs how much it costs, and they're very shocked. But at the same time, part of keeping it cheap was saying like, okay, the movie is going to be Kurt's live stream. So
Mm.
it's like, okay, we're going to just shoot it on iPhones and we're going to shoot it on dash cams for real.
Mm.
And then we're going to be able to eliminate things like master coverage, like which usually you have to uh, worry about all sorts of production design and other sorts of concern, lighting and other sorts of concerns when you do your master shots,
Mm.
securing locations, all these sorts of things we
Yeah.
didn't really have to worry about, and that I knew we wouldn't have to worry about if we just shot it on his phone and
Yeah. Yeah.
shot it on dash cams.
Yeah.
So
It's very. Yeah. Obviously, we're definitely going to get into that, and it is really interesting how you filmed Spree, and I can't wait to really get into hone in on that. But just one
sure.
more question about coming up: was it always? Did you always want to be behind the camera? Did you always want to be a director? Was that what you always
Oh,
thought you were going to go into?
yeah, for sure. So, like, I don't know if you've seen my other films, but basically, my previous four films, I am like the lead actor
Right. Okay.
in them. And that was born just out of necessity of like, okay, well, my first movie, I had kind of like a cast. I had a cast. I wasn't in it. And I didn't really know any of the cast besides the lead actor and maybe one of the supporting actors. So we really did like a very low budget, like LA casting process, which was interesting in its own way. And I think I was 23 years old or something, maybe 22. So it was very interesting, just sort of like seeing how people were really trying to quote unquote make it as actors and that they would really do anything. Because well, I mean, that movie, I don't know how it is findable in the US. It's called Zeros and Ones. And actually, it's worth talking about because Zeros and Ones, which I shot in 2008 and took me 2 years to finish, was released in 2010, is maybe the first screen movie. It's a movie about a guy who loses his computer at a high school reunion type party and then has to figure out who stole it, right? But the whole movie takes place through the language of a computer operating system. So, there's a scene that's like a Google search, and there's a scene that's like a game of Doom, and there's a scene that's like a throwback to AOL Instant Messenger, and there's a scene that's like you're on Facebook or whatever. So each scene kind of was an app or website or a game. And I thought I was like going to revolutionize the language of cinema or something like that when I was doing it. And I think it's good and okay for filmmakers to have that aspiration. And I think everyone going into a movie should think about, okay, how am I pushing forward the cinema language and stuff? But it was kind of traumatizing to make. It was extremely long and grueling process and didn't really set the world on fire the way that 22 to 25-year-old me like thought it would or could.
Yeah.
But if anyone can hunt it down, if you're on Caragarga or any of those torrent sites, you can find it. And while I was doing that, I made another movie called Skydiver, which was almost like a direct reaction to Zeros, how complicated Zeros and Ones was, because there were like 50 visual artists working with me, volunteering their time for free to make Zeros and Ones happen. It was really amazing that people showed up and worked hard and weren't getting paid and put in their creativity and stuff. So Skydiver is also a screen film. But it's just purely webcam capture. It's Skype, it's GChat video, and it was like almost like a prank I was doing, where I was playing this character because I had no money and no resources, who was slowly going insane and slowly turning into a domestic terrorist, based on in reaction to like a bad breakup that he had. And it was like the opposite, because for no money, I was also doing a movie that had to do with the language of the computer screen. And I was, showing interactions with websites and profiles and, whatever, the masturbatory narcissism of being online circa the year 2010, which has only gotten more crazy, more masturbatory, and more narcissistic in the last decade. So with Skydiver, putting myself in there was really easy. And like I was saying, it was a prank because all the people I was having these conversations with didn't know that I was acting and didn't know that I was recording them. Okay. There's a few exceptions. There's a few people who are in on it, but by and large, most people thought they were talking to Eugene, their friend, not Eugene, this slowly, character, and they were getting concerned and they were getting curious and they were getting like freaked out, and they also didn't know I was recording. Of course, I told them later. So once I did that, I realized like, hey, I'm not that bad of an actor, and I realized it was kind of easy to direct and manipulate the rhythm of the scene and the kind of reaction I wanted from my the other actors, quote unquote actors, even though they didn't know they were acting, by being in the scene. So when the next few movies rolled around, I just realized, all I have access to is financially or resource wise is like my life or some, version of my life that I could make fun of and make interesting. And so then the next few movies, which is A Wonderful Cloud and Wobble Palace and this web series I made, Feast of Burden, are sort of, stylized, sort of hyper real, surreal, whatever, caricatures and satires of my life, whatever you want to call it, hipster culture, art world culture. And I'm in all those movies because it's just easier to make fun of that world if I'm making fun of myself.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check all of them out.
Okay.
But it sounds like you had quite not a hard road, but well, no, you probably did have a hard road. Like in terms
It's
of
not.
you worked a lot to get where you are, and so
Yeah. Spree is not my first merry-go-round or whatever, my first rodeo.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to make it really clear that like I'm not complaining or anything. Like it's been, like I also worked like tons of corporate jobs and PA jobs and art department jobs and just literally I literally screwed in 5,000 light bulbs for a Nike commercial, these are my jobs and stuff. So I could take the time to work on these movies for like, 3 months out of every 18 months or something like that. But I don't want to complain because like I am actually living my dream, right? I've made whatever 4 or 5 movies and, there's people have seen them. And I really, it's not hard because it's like your passion. So if you're living out like your passion and your dream and stuff, it's not hard. It's just you wish you had more resources. So if I had money in my 20s, or if people were backing me, I could have made fucking 3 or 4 movies a year. Or made one really big movie a year, like Spree or something like that.
I guess what I was trying to go with that was there ever a time that you ever thought that this was not going to work out and you just had to persevere? Was there a time where you didn't think that you were going to be where you are right now?
Well, where I am is still the same like tiny type of apartment I've been living in since I first moved to LA, which is like, this office that you're talking to me into is actually just like a side little nook of my kitchen. But kind of no. I mean, like I said, I'm an immigrant. I'm from an immigrant family, and I don't think a day went by up until maybe a little earlier because my last 2 films got into South by Southwest. Probably a day didn't go by in all of my 20s, and maybe even up until Spree went to Sundance, where I didn't have a conversation with either my mom, my dad, or one of my grandparents, who mostly they're all gone now, my grandparents, where they just said, you need to quit. You need to stop doing this. You need to give up. You need to go get a real job. You should, you need to go back to school. You need to become a professional, like a lawyer or something, or you need to just figure out how you can work in films, whether you should be an assistant to someone or just whatever. They just wanted me to have a steady life, fulfill the sort of immigrant dream of stability and going on vacation once a year, or like living normally, having a family, all these all these things which I kind of didn't wasn't able to do because I was more interested in making movies and you sacrifice things to do that if you're not top of the world or whatever. But no, I never really considered it. I just knew that when I took on editing jobs or when I took on whatever other job, I worked at a 3D company. I just like, look, I just gotta, because also when you're doing a job for someone else, it can be very satisfying to get money, to get paid, to get pat on the back, to people who say, hey, you are integral to our organization, and here is your paycheck, and here's us making you feel good. It can be really easy to get kind of lazy and to get comfortable, which is what I think happens to the majority of people who move out to Hollywood or any sort of industry town. They come with big dreams and they want to make their movie, and then they just get a job, and then they realize, hey, I love coming home at 6 p.m. and turning on something to binge and, like whatever, having dinner with my partner and fucking and going to bed and then doing it all over again the next day, not having to worry about the immense sort of, I don't want to say pressure or responsibility, but whatever it is of being, of being responsible to yourself. It's a little bit, yeah.
I'm very glad that you persevered with it and didn't listen to your parents, and you carried on being a filmmaker, because I genuinely think that you're going to have a huge career, seriously, after seeing Spree. So to move on to Spree, can you take me back to where it literally like first started? Was it something you? Like you and Gene McHugh were the screenplay for this film, right? So
Yeah. So
was it? Go on.
No. Where it first started. The co-writer was Gene McHugh, and he is a person that I know from the art world. He's an art writer. He came up actually with a kind of essential term called post-internet. It was a blog that he had and an essay that he wrote defining kind of like art in a moment after everyone had been, sort of terminally online, or, terminally online 1.0, pre-social media, but post kind of like, we're all on the internet, we all have email, we're all using web browsers and shit. So Gene came to me with the idea of, let's make a movie about an Uber driver who goes on a killing spree and shoot it. He even had this idea very early on, although it took us another year to for me to reacclimate myself to it, of why don't we shoot it kind of minimally on a dash cam. He was thinking one dash cam. And I said, that's amazing. That's really good. I'm into it. I could see how we do it for very little money. And I, am interested in, the American, it's a worldwide phenomenon, but in America, it's basically a running gag of evil, of mass murderers, and, it's very different than the sort of kind of serial killer that's been explored in movies historically. Right, the mass murderer is someone who engages in a single event crime, for attention. Whereas I think obviously serial killers wanted a different type of attention and wanted, whatever. A mass murderer is really doing it for this dopamine rush of, look at me, I exist, I matter, and I am evil, or I am whatever my goal is. Sometimes it's ideological, oftentimes it's just narcissistic and ego driven. I think actually even when it's ideological, like the guy in Norway, Anders Breivik or whatever, even though he had a whole manifesto of ideology and stuff, it's always ego driven. It's always driven by just, I'm important and look at me. Anyway, so I wanted to dissect that very American phenomenon of mass murderers and kind of make fun of them. I wanted to make fun of them because I thought almost all media representation of murderers in movies was usually quite cool. It just seemed like even if they were bad or, the villain or whatever, there was something kind of sexy or aesthetically appealing about them. And I wanted to make sure that there was a different version out there where you basically make fun of these guys. Because in reality, I've read all these manifestos and I was just kind of interested in these people who were clearly getting warped by the internet. I think the rise of the mass murderer is very linked to the rise of sort of our virtualized identities and social media and the internet and stuff. So I read all these manifestos and they're just so transparently insecure and delusional and egomaniacal. I just wanted to make fun of them. It's just people trying to be like anime villains. Think about people like Elliot Rodger or something like that. Or even the Columbine shooters, they were maybe a bit more self-aware because they were kind of some of the first in terms of documenting what they're doing and stuff. But anyway, I just wanted to make fun of them. So we had to figure out for a while kind of what Kurt's motivation would be. And it went in a few different directions. We started thinking about maybe he's alt-right and blah, blah, blah. And then eventually we settled upon the idea that, hey, you know what? He actually has no ideological motivation at all. And let's just conflate the two ideas very explicitly. His whole thing is handles and want to quote unquote grow our personal brand. He just wants attention. He just wants to go viral. And so then it became not just a critique of mass murderers in America, but also a critique of social media and our
Yeah.
phone addiction and all that other stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, and it definitely does do that. And it was such an interesting take, as you said, like, because I do agree that the way that cinema or especially TV series that I've noticed, they really do make the serial killer look sexy, or they somewhat not glorify it, but they portray it in a certain way, which is different to the way that you wanted to portray Kurt. And you definitely noticed that in the film, certainly.
Yeah, I think it does glorify it. I mean, I think when you apply a certain aesthetic sensibility to
Mm,
violence, unless
mm,
you are interrogating that violence,
yeah,
it does glorify it. And even movies that do interrogate that violence, like Natural Born Killers
yeah,
or A Clockwork Orange is a
mm,
perfect example, or American Psycho or something, these movies
mm,
that are kind of like critiques of violence while simultaneously aestheticizing them. I just wanted to take that a step further and say, like, we
mm,
actually don't even need to aesthetic, or like, we don't need, I'm not trying to prescribe how people should make a fucking movie. Make the movie you want to
mm,
make. But for me, it was interesting to figure out how we could like de-aestheticize, this character and the violence. And part of that had to do with sort of like cringe comedy,
yeah,
the sort of comedy, and it's kind of runs through my other films as well, but it's the sort of comedy that makes you feel kind of uncomfortable watching how oblivious the characters are,
mm,
and how they think they're being cool and what suave, but in fact they're very they have their heads are very far up their own asses, and
yeah,
they're quite lame.
yeah,
So yeah, so that was kind of a big part of making it uncool and unsexy, but still fun and
yeah,
watchable,
yeah,
which is sort of doubling down the cringe comedy. And I think Joe Keery, who plays Kurt, really understood that, and we
mm,
explored that a lot with research and stuff. But he
mm.
really made it his own for sure.
Yeah. So that's another point that I was going to go into. So how did you land someone like a Joe Keery? Because obviously he's in Stranger Things. It's one of the biggest shows of the last 5-6 years, 100%.
Yeah.
So was it so what is the process of getting
Yeah.
somebody like that onto your film?
So basically, we had a casting agent. It was my
Mm,
first time working with a casting agent. Her name is
mm,
Rebecca Deely. Her company is called Christie Street Films,
mm-hmm,
and Christie Street Casting, I guess. And Rebecca's super cool, super nice. Put together lists of potential actors and actresses for all of the roles, and set up phone calls and meetings. In a pre-COVID world, we had
yeah,
actual like meetings at like a hotel lobby, when it's not an audition for a role like that, because usually you're talking to actors who have some sort of established career, and the movie is quite small, so you have a
mm-hmm,
conversation with them and see if you get along. And Joe was just someone that I had a great conversation with, and we got along really well.
mm-hmm,
And it's a little bit of like a dance, so you have another conversation, and then you tell Rebecca, or you tell your producers, like, hey, I think Joe is like a really good fit. Actually, here's the thing: Joe and Sashir, who ended up playing Jesse Adams in the film,
mm-hmm,
were kind of like the first two people I met. And
mm,
actually, literally, when Joe was leaving the hotel lobby, Sashir was coming in. Um, and I even introduced them. I'm like, I don't know. I just thought, okay, I'm going to introduce them.
yeah,
And then after that day, I said to Rebecca, I said, I really think that if we had to make the movie with Joe and Sashir right now, like, it would be really good.
yeah,
And she said, well, that's awesome, but like, we just started the casting process, so I really think, maybe you're just getting overexcited, and maybe, we should definitely keep going. And I said, okay, let's keep going. So we did that for like another few weeks, and then
mm.
I was just like, nah, I think we should just go with Joe and Sashir. And I'm glad we did. I think they both, I mean, imagine casting for the Jesse Adams character someone who's not a comedian. Like,
Yeah,
Sashir is a comedian. Like, so she
mm,
knew exactly how to make fun of the relationship that comedians have to their
mm-hmm,
social media. And also, we were able to use all of that footage from her career,
mm-hmm,
that like in this quote unquote found footage 2.0 movie, we're able to use all this existing comedy stand-up footage to very quickly establish like who she is, what her vibe is. And we had to pick clips that weren't like Sashir, but were more like Jesse.
Yeah.
But I think that was very helpful. And her background as a comedian, obviously, you know, she was able to do her set straight through, 10-minute set, and get the vibe of the stand-up
Yeah.
comedy, you know, without having to work, because it just
Yeah.
is a part of her, and she knew how to make fun of it too.
Yeah. I think they're both fantastic in the film. I think the thing for me with Joe's performance in the film, I was very much looking at his character and comparing it to other characters I've seen in other movies. So, and the one that I came close to was Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. And but what was different with Joe Keery's performance, I think, and possibly the way you wanted it to come across, or how Kurt you wanted to come across, I actually felt a little bit of empathy, even though he was this mass murderer. I felt empathy for his character because of how much. I mean, it combines with the social media. All he wants to do is go viral. All he wants to do is have a group of people that likes him. So, would you think Joe? Well, I presume you agree with this, that Joe definitely understood that, and he allows his performance to show that.
100%. I mean, I think so. I had a bunch of reference movies that I sent to the actors and to the crew. American Psycho was not one of them, but I definitely get the comparison. And I think the Patrick Bateman character is coming from an incredible place of like kind of condescension. You know, he obviously thinks that he is superior to all of the people around him. Whereas Joe, and we always harken back to this sort of motivational note for Kurt, which is he's trying to help people. Kurt, you know, in his own deranged and, you know, sort of broken internet mind, Kurt Kunkel is a helper. He is offering a tutorial for his viewers on how to go viral. And if you offer a tutorial, if you share your tips and your tricks with your audience, even if that audience is one person, you are a helper. And so Joe was always approaching this character. I mean, up until I think, you know, the third act or something, he's always approaching this character from a place of helping. And I think that and how oblivious he is, naive he is, does create a level of empathy for the viewer, especially in a world where everyone else is also driven by likes and follows, and they're much more ruthless about. I mean, they're not killing people, so they're not, you know, they're not ruthless in a psychotic way, but they are ruthless in a much more sort of like, you know, selfish way. Let's say, you know, if we are to posit that Kurt is selfless. So yeah, you know, he in certain ways he becomes the most likable character up until a certain point, because you feel for him, and you also see a little bit of yourself in him. Like, you don't want to see yourself in the like scummy pickup artist or the, you know, white supremacist, like, you know, blowhard. But you kind of do see yourself in Kurt, who's someone who's like, I'm just going to share, like, you know, my tips, and I just want to, like, I want people to see the good guy that I am. And that is kind of how we all bought into this contract of social media. And the contract says that if you have a personal experience or a personal thought, ye shall share said experience or thought. And there is something morally good about sharing the food that you ate that day, or the observation you're making about the metro system, or whatever it is. There's something weirdly, quote unquote, good about sharing that, because sharing is good. Now, of course, this is a grand delusion of you are now turning all of humanity into a huge content mill. But in order for that to happen, everyone has to buy into this original idea of social media. If you think about early blogging and early, you know, Facebook, where you're constantly posting, that sharing is caring, or something like that.
And Joe clearly definitely understands it, and his performance is fantastic. So when you first created the film, did it get a lot of attention? Sorry, when you first came up with the idea, wrote the script, did it gain a lot of attention very early? Did you notice that it was different to the other movies that you've made? Like, people were getting really behind this, excited behind it, or?
Do you mean like when we were trying to raise money and stuff?
Yeah.
Well, kind of. This was probably my third time around shopping a script. My other films actually were made in between shopping scripts that never got financed. So those other films were basically made off of like a 20-page script mint or like blueprint or something. So yeah, this time around when I was going around with it, there was more of a response. Also, I had already had my second movie at South by, so I had like a little bit more traction. I had an agent. Yeah, but it was, you know what? At the end of the day, it was actually the same. Like it was like, oh, we love this. This is so cool. Like this is it. And then they would call you back like a few days later or a week later and be like, hey, sorry, my boss like doesn't get it. Or like, oh yeah, like I totally forgot we're doing this other thing about a rideshare killer. I can't believe I forgot. You know, it was just kind of like excuses. They would say that they were into it. I probably had like close to 50 meetings trying to raise money at production companies and stuff. And, you know, if some people just didn't get it, which is totally fine. You know, why would you be making fun of mass murderers? And some people, you know, maybe they did get it, like these lower level execs, but they didn't hold the purse strings at their companies and stuff. So it was a lot of rejection. I mean, it took us maybe a year and a half on and off to finish the script. And I was probably shopping the first version of the script for 2 months, which was a little bit different. And then the final version of the script for another 4-5 months. And ultimately the first money in, like the money that came from my other movies, was actually totally random. It was just totally from someone who had never worked, never invested in a film before, who was trying to get into movies, who had seen my previous film, Wobble Palace, and had seen it and knew me through his girlfriend. And she just reached out and she said, hey, like, you know, Alex, who eventually became this company, Spacemaker Films, which I think is going to be a really good production company. And they already have another film going to Berlin in a few months, and another film that's going to be shooting in Tunisia later in the year. So the EP came on Spree as their first movie. I think is going to be doing very cool movies. So she was just like, you know, Alex would want to get involved with whatever you're doing next. And I was like, oh my God, that is music to my ears. Although I have to say this for, you know, like sometimes a gift stares you in the face. Actually, it's like a line from Spree, right? That David Arquette's character says, never look a gift in the mouth or something, which is like the wrong line. But, I mean, which is like intentionally like a wrong idiomatic expression. I was like, in my head, I was like, oh my God. But in real life, I was like, oh my God, that's really cool. Like I'm in the middle of pitching it to, I think I was going to like Annapurna at the time or something like that, or, you know, some big company. I was like, so let me just see how that goes and get back to you. And then literally like 10 minutes later, I'm like, what the fuck am I thinking? And I called her back and I said, but yeah, let's set up a meeting like tomorrow, you know, let's set up a meeting tomorrow and let me send you guys the deck, you know, because you have to make a deck to pitch this thing in case people don't want to read the script. You make a PDF document with your nice little photos and you know, like persuasive descriptions and sexy descriptions, the coolest possible version of what you're doing. And so yeah, we started connecting on it, Spacemaker and I connected, and so Spacemaker was the first money in. And then based on meetings that I had actually at Annapurna, where we did not get financing from, the exec that I met at Annapurna, her name is Sumaya Kave, she quit from there and formed her own company. And that company that she formed with this guy, Matt Budman, had a first look deal with Drake's company that does like Euphoria and Top Boy and stuff. And so then this was the first project that they pitched to Drake's company, which is called Dream Crew. And unlike traditional film execs, the Dream Crew team comes from music and they understand kind of like the voice of the artist, you know, and like kind of like, oh, if someone has a vision and they know exactly what they want and we think it's cool, then we're going to fuck with it. So I got extremely lucky to meet them and to work with Sumaya and Matt. And that was the other sort of executive producer on the film, Drake, and his company, Dream Crew, through Forest Hill, which is the company that Matt and Sumaya formed.
Yeah.
So that's how we got the money for the film. But by the time Drake came on, I believe we already had Joe attached.
Right. Okay.
Or we were very close to having Joe attached.
Cool.
So the wheels were already in motion.
I actually didn't know that. That I didn't know that they were they produced part of the film.
Drake is an EP on the film. Which always is very shocking to people.
Yeah,
because it is such a, the aesthetic of the film and the way we made it was extremely DIY.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a non-union film, and it's a film that we shot really under the radar. And again, the producerial mind, I was like, okay, well, let's make sure we save the craziest shit for last, so we don't get so the freeway chase where we had 20 stunt drivers, where we had to shut down the freeway. That was something we did one of the last days and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was a question I was going to ask. How long did it actually take you to make the movie? In terms of shooting, how long was the process?
So we had 20 principal photography days.
Mm-hmm.
So 20 shoot days between March and April of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some days that I shot with Joe before the movie started that actually ended up in the movie. Like for instance, a week and a half before principal photography began, I wanted to introduce David Arquette, who plays Kurt's father, and Joe, because they never met. And I said, well, you guys are father and son, so we need this rapport. So we actually went out on the town together to have dinner and drinks and, be weird, all in character. They were father, son, Kurt and Chris, in character. And it was very amazing dynamic from the get-go. And I was filming it all on my phone, and Joe filmed some of it too. I would hand the phone off to him so we could do first person style stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that is in the beginning of the movie in kind of the opening montage with his dad. And then later on, we use that for, I don't know if you've checked out the social media account that we made to promote the film.
I've seen it briefly, but not studied it at all.
So if you go on at Kurt's World 96 on Instagram, that was a project that I also worked on really closely, and it was almost like making a second movie. When we were putting the film out, it's like an augmented reality game where, it's a little bit over now, but people were live interacting with Kurt as he was, trying to get followers and views on Instagram. And it was almost like a mini capsule version of the movie without all the killing. It's like a prelude to all the mass murder, but at the same time, you feel the sort of desperation and obliviousness and helpfulness of Kurt in the ARG. So I definitely recommend people, if they like the film, to check out Kurt's World 96 on Instagram, because I think it's super funny, what we ended up doing. So then after the movie, Joe and I also shot a few pickups, like some of the stuff from the opening montage, which wasn't in the script, which is something we came up with in the edit. The opening montage, so we need to get additional footage for it. And then we shot some more stuff for the Kurt's World Instagram account. So but really 20 days principal, and maybe another 2-3 days for pickups for the movie, and then another 2 days for the Kurt's World account.
That really doesn't seem that long for how for the quality of what I saw on screen. It seems very short, so it seemed like you managed to do so much in such a short space of time.
Yeah. I think part of it has to do with my previous films, which, like I said, I made for, under $70,000. I shot those films in Wonderful Cloud. We shot in 8 days, and Wobble Palace we shot in 7 days. And this new movie, I actually have a new film that I put out after Spree, which is actually for free to anyone who wants to watch it anywhere in the world at www.weare.fyi. We shot that movie in 5 days. So I do have this background, like I'm saying, the producerial background, where I just want to plow through everything and just, do it as fast as possible. Because I just think you get an energy when you make a movie super fast, or when you tell actors and crew, like, hey, we only have 2 takes for this. It creates an energy that courses through the actual film that viewers can pick up on. But yeah, I think we probably even could have done it in like maybe 18 days or something, but but you know, everyone was kind of pushed to the limit. And you know, the setup for Spree is pretty easy too, because it's like long takes. You know, you're in the car, so it's long takes. So like a scene is a day, and some of these scenes run, you know, between 3 to 7 minutes in terms of these car rides. So it was kind of built to be shot relatively quickly anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm amazed that it was done in that short space of time. I think what I loved so much about Spree was the originality. It's I've never seen actually a film like it. You've seen films shot on camcorders or GoPros or whatever, but not to this degree, not to this level. And it's consistent throughout. I've never seen a film actually do a live stream as part of the film, and it was crazy. So if you could just briefly touch upon why is it you wanted to completely shoot the film through through that lens, so to speak.
Yeah. So just that's, I think, integral to like what the film is. So I'm glad you're asking that. Like, so like I said at the beginning, Gene, the co-writer, said we should shoot it like a minimal style, like a dash cam. And so then we started developing the script. I was like, okay, this is gonna get really boring for doing it like one angle. So maybe what happens is when we're in the car with Kurt, it's dash cam, it's sort of docu verite style. And then when he gets out of the car, we shoot traditional, we shoot 35 mil, we shoot on film, and it's kind of like Kurt is no longer in control of his world, and we're trying to develop scenes where he's kind of like almost like a, you know, the master in the car, and he's like a nobody outside of the car. And it's just like a different route that the script was going. And then when we kind of came upon the social media thing, we were just like, we should just do the whole thing as a live stream. And this is his live stream. And then, you know, we were still documenting his whole day in the original version, but I was like, it's just his live stream, you know? And so then we started thinking about creative ways to do that, and how to get the phone involved, and how to, you know, basically create, I don't want to say a new language for cinematic storytelling, but how to make sure that this language was going to be as accessible as the normal grammar for a film narrative. And also how we could, you know, play around with it and make it seamless. I mean, actually, the amount of people who don't comment on this kind of radical, formal decision that we made just speaks to, on some level, how successful we were in making it just completely watchable and accessible, because it's not normal. Like I said, there's no master shots, there's no reverse shots, there's no over the shoulders, there's no you know, the grammar of the storytelling is not normal. You know, there's tons of split screens in the movie. There's text on screen all the time. If you don't know what the fuck you're doing, I mean, in some ways, I brought up those Scream movies that I made 10 years ago, because I think that was like a really good trial run for what Spree became, you know, which is kind of, you know, you watch, there's been other Scream movies, right? Like I think Unfriended is a pretty good movie, and there's like interesting things that happen in the movie Searching or whatever. But there's no actual reason for those movies to exist on a computer screen, right? Like the documentation of the events is not built in to the narrative, all right? And so for me, that was like integral to what we were trying to do. I was saying, look, we're going to foreground the usage of this technology because that's what Kurt is about. And while I guess that's not exactly necessary, because I do think on some level Unfriended and Searching work, I think Spree works way better because you are constantly breaking the fourth wall on purpose. You're constantly thinking about the transmission of this story through the creator, who, you know, is Kurt for the majority of it. And then at the end, I think, you know, you sort of get like a mild twist of like what you just watched. Spoiler alert, but you know, you're watching it almost real time. It feels like you're watching the live stream, which was the point, and which I think you know, was a gamble. You know, you like there's a scene, for instance, where he talks to Bobby at the gas station, but he's not actually talking to Bobby. He's just interacting with Bobby's chat messages.
Yeah.
You know, and so I said to the cast and crew, I said, look, this is going to be weird, but it's just going to be Joe talking to a phone, and I'm going to be walkie-talking back to him what the messages are, the chat messages are. But in the final movie, it's just going to be an actor talking to text, you know, interacting with text. And who knows if that'll work, but trust me, please trust me. And luckily everyone trusted me, and I think it does work, you know.
I completely agree. And I think what's the most impressive thing about that is with film, there's so many people doing so many different things all the time, and it's very hard right now, I think, to be original in film. So what you're able to do, for me, is one of the most original things I've seen over the last, when I've really started to get into film. It's one of the most original things that I've seen. So that's why I'm so hyped up about your career, because I think it's going to go far. The fact that you're able to do this in an industry that has got so many talented people in, and so many people who are coming up with the next big thing. So that's why I'm so excited about this film.
Thanks very much. I appreciate your enthusiasm. I do think it's the responsibility of all filmmakers and people in the quote unquote industry, which actually I do not think the industry rewards innovation or taking a risk or anything. I think it's actually extremely conservative when it comes to all the creative arts. The film industry is one of the more conservative ones for sure. I mean, anytime someone does something that feels new and is successful, look at all the copycats. I mean, like you have a Pulp Fiction poster behind you. I mean, people are copying that movie for the next 5-10 years, you know?
Yeah.
In terms of screenwriting style, in terms of crime stories, in terms of, you know, 3-part or 4-part out of order stories, the narrative structure. So I don't think it's a town that really rewards innovation. But I think it is the responsibility of filmmakers to say, how do we push forward this language, which is 100 years old, this medium, which is, you know, 100 years old, to do new things? And how do we make those things entertaining and relevant to contemporary audiences? Because films, you know, traditional films, narrative, 90-minute to 100, whatever, 50-minute movies no longer hold a primacy in our culture in the way they once did. There's a new game in town, which is, you know, episodic, which is series. And if we're trying to make traditional films, we need to ask ourselves, how do we keep this exciting and fresh and relevant to contemporary culture? And how do we, and at the same time, how do we push forward the medium? Because what's the point of making the same thing that we've already seen thousands of times before? So that is my imperative. That is my kind of challenge to myself when I go into making the next film every time. And I was lucky enough to have, you know, resources and a team behind me on something like Spree. But I think that spirit is necessary even when you're making just a movie on your phone by yourself or with your friends. Like, that spirit is the spirit I encourage all filmmakers to have.
That's awesome to hear. So I've got one final question about Spree, and it's just, what do you want your audience to take away from that film? Is it to reflect on their social media game? Is it then to think, am I spending too much time on my phone? Am I uploading this content for whatever reason? Was the message that you wanted to get across, or is it your opinion that social media is a good thing?
Well,
that's a tough question.
No. You're good, Joe. I think people should take away whatever message they want from a film. It's not necessarily my job to be like a message maker, you know, as long as the film entertains you. And I think it's definitely saying something that is satirical, that is critical, that does make fun of not just, you know, like these horrible people doing these horrible things, but also our social media, quote unquote, addiction. I mean, you used the word actually in your question, you said the social media game. And I do think that in a weird, not in a weird way, but in a very intentional way, these apps and social media itself is gamified. You know,
Mm.
it is built around sort of accomplishment, dopamine rush of views, which is obviously in the entire premise of the film. Um, and that is a dangerous game because social media is not just linked to games, it's also linked to our identity, to how we
Mm.
see ourselves, to how we understand the world around us, to how we value other people. I mean, Spree shows also a film where everyone is constantly in a sort of transactional, or what they call parasocial, relationships with each other, where people kind of use each other for attention and for notoriety and for views and likes and stuff. And it's definitely something worth reflecting on
Mm.
and questioning. I mean, I
Mm.
think during lockdown we're so much more on our phones than ever, and we have all this time. I'm not talking about me, because whatever, I sit around thinking about this shit all the time because it's my job. But I think people who normally would be distracted by going out on the town or going into work or the sort of grind of the old world, the pre-COVID world, kind of don't have those distractions anymore. So they're getting deeper and deeper into their phones.
Mm.
And it's a very dangerous narcissism machine if you don't reflect on it. And
Mm.
it's a very dangerous mental illness machine if you don't reflect on how these things are changing you and how they are reprioritizing what you value in terms of your own identity and in terms of the world around you. So, yeah, I mean, whatever. I want people to have a good time when they watch the
Mm.
movie, I hope. And then, yeah, think about their own relationships to
Mm.
this stuff.
Well, I had a great time watching film, but that's what I guess that's what I took from it. I definitely reflected on how much I use social media after it. I mean, I'm still using it. The whole point. This is what I'm doing. I'm doing a podcast. Like I advertise it through social media. So, but
Right.
I definitely did look at that side of it a bit more than or thought about it a bit more than I hadn't before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's realistic for everyone to like get off of social media right away so that we can all start
Mm.
being like healthy, fully formed citizens again or something like that. But I do think, it's important to understand our participation in something that is inherently unhealthy and is inherently like depressing and like ego boosting, and also like makes you feel like shit. And that's
Mm.
all part of the game. And if we can reflect on those things, then we can start building better practices personally and also as a society and stuff. And I think on a certain level, it's up to capitalism, which is very scary to think. It's up to the people who invent new apps to start thinking about mental health and to start thinking about how we can start feeling less shitty on our devices. And I think there will be a big reward to whoever comes up with a social media app that makes people feel less shitty. I mean, you can also almost see it a little bit in TikTok, where I think TikTok is a little bit, obviously people are going to do crazy shit for attention, but it's a little bit, makes you feel a little bit less bad about yourself because it's a little bit more about creativity and a little
Mm.
bit less about like sort of vanity and narcissism.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
mean, all that stuff eventually seeps into everything. But
Mm-hmm.
TikTok being a slightly more Zoomer, less millennial app,
Mm.
I think you just see a kind of slightly more positive energy in it.
Yeah, I agree. Well, everyone, please check out Spree. It is fantastic. We're coming to the back end of the talk now. I guess something that I always do with, especially directors, is there any films that you are looking to make or are in making? Obviously, COVID times. I mean, it's probably made it very difficult for you to, or made it more difficult than you would like to be. I mean, I'm not sure how much you can disclose either. But
Yeah,
that's
well,
what I'd like to ask.
like I said at the beginning, I'm trying to write a movie that's kind of like Fellini-esque childhood movie that also has to do with like a certain mob story. And it has a highly conceptual nature in that it revolves around toasting at a Russian restaurant, which is a really big part of Russian culture, drinking. And these toasts are sort of an entry point into flashbacks and fantasies that sort of fill in the story. So it's conceptual. And I was at a store the other day, and they have a red box. Do you know what that is? It's
No.
it's like a vending machine for DVDs. They're on the outs. They're no longer really that popular, but at a certain point they were popular. So there's still leftovers at supermarkets and stuff. And I was at the supermarket, and the red box was advertising some Nicolas Cage movie that was like an action movie from like Thailand or something. And I saw literally his face on it for a split second, and I just said like, why aren't I working with Nick Cage? Like, I love Nicolas Cage. He makes 10 fucking movies a year, and 9 of them you never even heard of, but he just loves to work, you know, and he basically will do anything that I guess pays him a certain amount of money, or, you know, gives him an opportunity to flex. And I just said, well, why don't I work with him? Like, I could write a really good movie for Nicolas Cage. Probably. So I don't want to jinx it. I mean, I guess I just fucking said it on air, but I'm trying to write a movie for Nick Cage. So check in with me in 2 years, and hopefully we'll have made the movie, you know. And if we did it, I'm gonna sound like an asshole, and I just jinxed the whole thing, which sucks. But that is my that's the bed that I made for myself. Yep. So I'm crossing my fingers. I hope it happens. I think he's supremely talented actor, probably a generational actor who, because of his sort of desire to make as many movies as possible because he loves to work, gets a really short end of the stick. But I bet you if we sat here for 1 minute, which we could do right now, we could name 10 amazing Nick Cage performances, and we would just be scratching the surface. So those are like kind of the things I'm working on. There's like other things too. You have to be working on lots of different things all at once, because especially if you're trying to get funding from industry, you never know what people are going to respond to, or what is going to be popular in that moment in time that's going to convince them, oh, hey, this is a perfect project for us. Yeah. So generally when I get on these calls, which I'm about to get on in like 20 minutes, you should have a few things that you want to talk about or that you're interested in, and then they can pick or something like that.
Very cool.
Or you can just have a passion project that you go peddling about town for 2 years and wait for the right person to randomly call you on the phone, like Spree, and hope it happens. Or you can just make sure that when you are going around peddling your other script and you get desperate and no one cares, that you just get desperate, not in a way where you self-harm or start playing video games or go binge eating or whatever, but you find a way to make a film with as little money as possible, as quickly as possible, so that you can feel sane and so that you can try to entertain the world or entertain your friends or whatever it is.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. Oh well, Nick Cage, if you are watching this at any point, please work with Eugene.
Is this going to be a video interview, or is it going to be just an audio podcast?
Both. It can. I'm looking to move to YouTube. I don't have to put. I don't have to put a video up if you don't want.
No, I don't care. But you just said if he's watching.
Yeah. Well, listening or watching Nick Cage. If you're listening, I'm not sure if you will be.
He definitely listens to movie podcasts for sure. I'm sure Nick Cage is listening to tons of movie podcasts.
Well, if he listens to mine, please work with Eugene. Eugene, that was a fantastic chat. Thank you very much for it.
My pleasure, Joe.
Definitely check out his film Spree. It's on UK Netflix. This was the first episode of season 2. I want to thank Eugene for agreeing to come on and providing what I think was a really interesting chat, which I think a lot of people will take away from. This is the whole point of the podcast. I'm looking to help upcoming filmmakers listen to people who are successful in the industry, working in it, and taking notes from them. Check out his film. Follow me on Instagram at _the CinemaScope, so you don't miss any of my episodes. Season 2 is officially underway. Thanks again, Eugene.